Let me just check in. Munich, Lenka. Forgive me, I've butchered the whole thing. What's your first name?
Yeah, it's correct. It's Lenka. Munich is the name of the church I go to.
Okay.
Yeah, sir.
So I was just gonna check in because I don't know what the structure's like where you are. So if at any point you feel like things are a bit different, just chip in, and if there's anything that we could speak to that or whatever, just come through. So just double check, in your specific role, are you like a youth leader, young adult leader, pathfinders? How does it work? Don't feel put on the spot, by the way. I'm just checking in from my own brain before I start. Forgive me, everybody else. This is just like a little private thing that we're doing right now. Go ahead, Lenka.
Yeah, I'm a youth leader assistant.
Okay. So then you've got, and then you've got a conference youth leader as well, and then the union type of thing. All right,
yeah,
calm.
I think
all right, so everyone's on the same page.
I guess.
Yeah. Everyone's on the same page. All right, cool. Thank you very much. My apologies for putting you on the spot. Let me okay, because I know you got like some places you got union of churches in some countries in the TED, and some countries in the TED have a union and conferences. So I know there's slightly different structures depending on what country you're in. Can I share my screen, please?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, here we go. So really, if I'm being honest with you, these are just some bits and pieces that I've picked up over the years about working in church, effective working in church, stop me at any stage, question me at any stage. I want this probably to be more conversational. I haven't got a breath of the time, and let me put the time here. So if I'm going on too long, someone just come in and let me know I'm going on too long. I've probably got some things on here which are personal bugbears. So I'm gonna try not to stay too long on those points. But if you see me laboring a point and it's turned from a seminar into preaching, then just come in and say, Sam, you're preaching. Can you continue doing the seminar, please? All right. And I'm not the best spelling person. So any spelling or typographical or whatever errors that you see in here, just blame, this is going on YouTube, isn't it? Oh, well, it is what it is. Blame Pastor Ramdin, and I'm sure he can rectify anything that comes to you via an email so I'm not saying he's going to edit these, but probably he might look over them. All right then. So working as a youth leader in the church organization. Let's go. Church layers. I feel like everybody here knows this. So I'm just gonna breeze through. Let me move this thing around. Oh, there's a better way to do this actually. Technology. I can bring it up on my keynote. Cancel that, play. All right, so church layers, general conference and its divisions. So sometimes we think, well, you got local church, and I shouldn't have numbered these, because sometimes when you've got numbers, you feel like one's more important than the other one, but each are equally important and each are equally valid, if that makes sense. But your local church, then a conference or a mission is like a set of local churches. A union, it tends to be a number of conferences and missions come together to create a union, and a union is a block of a division of the conference. So right now we're in the Trans-European division. Rafat Kamal is our president, and we sit in the British Union Conference. Pastor Ian Sweeney at the moment is our president. I know that we've got potentially a union session coming up this year, so we'll see what happens when the delegates at session vote. I'm in the NEC. Some of you are in the ACC, the conference president for the SEC is Pastor O'Shea, Pastor Emmanuel O'Shea, and for the NEC is Pastor Richard Jackson. And then you have your local church, and that's really where we're based, even though I'm going to challenge that notion in a second. But as youth leaders, that's really where we're based. But if when we're working effectively, we'll get there in a moment. Now, because of the technology, I can move this along on here. All right, local church. Local church. Let's go there. Let's go there. Different elements that you got to think about in working within your local church as a youth leader. I'm sure all you guys are probably more seasoned than me. You know this, but let's just go through it anyway. Pastor, elders, board, business meeting, you as the youth leader, youth leadership team, committees. So the pastor really is the designated conference personnel at your local church. That's who the local church pastor is. He's kind of representing the conference at your local church. Then, so that's the leader that the conference has put there. Then the head elder is the leader that the local church. It's kind of a crazy dynamic because the local church has elected a leader, and then the conference has also put a leader there, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. So sometimes that works very well, and sometimes that works. So you've got the conference, you've got the elders there who've been voted in, and then you've got your church board. Typically, most youth leadership teams will have an elder as part of the youth leadership team. And most church departments will have an elder as part of their church department. Is that whatever? Let me just come out of this. Is that what? Let me stop sharing. Is that what everyone does on your thing? You've got an elder.
I don't think so.
I'm part of your youth team. Yeah? No?
I was just gonna, yeah, it's very well. Different church I've been in is very slightly in that. In large churches, you have like well, in my experience in the past, I had a youth elder who's assigned to us, but won't actually be a part of we wouldn't meet with them. So yeah, in a sense, it would kind of part of a committee. So yeah, consulting and like mentoring in that sense. Yes, but being in a smaller church now, because it's quite small, like in terms of I don't have like a youth elder, so it's just I'm part of the board, but it's
okay. But there's no designated elder to your to the team. Okay.
No, because it's just there's not any elders.
I'm with you.
Yeah, because it's a small church.
Yeah. I can get the dynamic. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Marla, were you gonna say something?
I have an elder designated to my youth team, and I'm still on the board as well. So anytime I just go straight to the board and announce it as well. But I tend to have to go through the head elder to let him know what it is that we're planning as well. So it's technically I go through two elders in my little church.
Yeah, no problem. We're gonna come to that in a moment. But yeah, okay then. So it seems like most people have got a similar structure, or their workings are variants of that. Let's go. How do I play this thing? Move that. There we go. So you've got your church board, which I'm sure if you're the youth leader, you sit on there. If you're part of the youth committee, your youth leader sits on the church board. And for the majority of decisions that take place, probably the church board is the space that those decisions happen. For bigger decisions, those decisions tend to happen at business meeting. So I don't know, if they're going to knock down 3 walls and install a new car park or something like that, that's not going to happen. The church board can't just make that decision. It will tend to happen at a business meeting. Youth leader, that's where you come in, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. As a youth leader, you've got a youth leadership team, hopefully, Smaller churches may just be one person. Larger churches, you may have more than one person. And number 7, I wanted to speak to this really is committees. So there shouldn't really be one person in any church making all the major decisions. Really and truly, we follow a committee approach to things. What that means is that we believe in a multitude of counselors, there's safety. There's a number of texts that I could go through, but we're not going to go through all of those because I'm sure you're all aware. But there's a number of texts you could go through in the multitude of counselors, their safety. And so as a church, globally, we've chosen a committee approach, and there tends to be more authority in committees than in people. So you won't just see a pastor saying, this is what we're doing. No. It needs to be ratified by the board. If it's a huge decision, you won't just see, so the board, we're going to disfellowship somebody. No. It needs to be ratified by a business meeting. Or the board will just say, oh, we're going to transfer somebody's membership from here to here. No. It needs to come to the business meeting. So committees tends to be where the decision-making things happen. Okay, so these are just some things. What's the time? People just tell me the time in different junctures, and I'll keep it in the chat because I don't know what the time is. These are just some things that I felt like, as a youth leader, if you're starting off in the church structure, these are 15 things that I feel like these can help you to work effectively in your local church. And not only in your local church, just as a youth leader, locally, conference-wide, nationally, etc. Build relationships. Number 1, obviously, God. This goes without speaking, but I feel like if you miss it out, you haven't done service to the presentation. So I feel like the presentation needs to be made. Forgive me, I'm just having somebody come through the room. I think I'm not sure what they're doing. No apologies. This isn't very professional. I know what's going on YouTube. Please forgive us. So anyway, build relationships with God. What that means, what that entails, active devotional life. Be familiar with what the church believes. Make sure you align yourself with what the church is on about. 28 fundamentals. Be about what you're claiming to be about. That's basically what that means. Build a relationship with God. Second of all, sometimes I feel like youth leaders can be more program focused than relationship focused. So sometimes I'm so focused on trying to create programs that I've forgotten about trying to create relationships. So relationship is more important than programming. Relationship is more important than programming. Relationship is more important than programming. Okay, right. I feel like I said that enough now. So build relationship with the young people. Do you know them? When are their birthdays? When are they planning to graduate? Are they leaving for uni this year? Are they coming back from uni this year? Have they just got a new job? What's their spiritual, whereabouts are they on the spiritual spectrum of things? Masunda, you're unmuted. You come through. Oh, you have it unmuted. Okay, my bad. The green box came around your thing. My bad. Okay, where are they? Where are they on the just spiritually? How are they doing? Is somebody about to go? What are some of their hopes? What are some of their dreams? What are some of the different factors that are affecting them? What I mean by that is get to know the young people. How are you going to lead them if you don't know them? I'm hoping that makes sense. Right, after the youth, parents. It will be a schoolboy error to try and run a youth department and you have no relationship with the parents. That is, you're asking for trouble. Especially if you've got like 15, 16-year-olds. If you're working with people under 17 and you haven't got a relationship with the parents, start today. Build a relationship with the parents. Ways you can do that. Have a parents' meeting. Have Have a parents evening. Maybe you have a parents evening. Just say we just wanted to we just wanted to bring all the youth and the parents together and just let you know that we appreciate you. This can be a way to reach parents that aren't in church, because sometimes you need to engage with parents who aren't in church. This can be a way to bring parents who are on side, who aren't on your side. It feels like sometimes but sometimes you feel like they're not on your side, but just bring them on side. You want to engage with them, let them know they're appreciated, let them know that you're there to support them, and let them know that you want their support. Get the parents on side. Get the parents on side. Elders. If you're butting heads with the elder, it's rocky roads. I'm trying to come off point number one. This is what I was telling you about. Interject if you feel like I'm preaching and I need to move on. If you're already butting heads with the elders, it's going to be a rocky road. Have good working relationships with the elders, pastors. Okay, here we go. When was the last time you spoke to your conference youth director? It's a rhetorical question, but I'm pausing for effect. Sometimes there's support and things like those that you can get from the conference youth director. Build a relationship with them. Build a relationship with the conference youth director, because there's support you can get. Maybe you shoot a message to Pastor Ramdin. Pastor Ramdin, I'm doing something for church. I don't know. I was just wondering. I wanted to do some giveaways. Have you got any giveaways at the conference that I can give to the youth? Build a support. Build a connection. Build a connection with the conference youth director. Build a connection with the conference youth director, the uni youth director. Sorry. Have them to come down and preach. Maybe there's some funding at the union that you didn't know about. I'm going to speak about that shortly. That might be able to help you in your local youth programs. Speak to the division youth director. Maybe there's some stuff happening in the division that maybe you can get involved with. You can give your local church some more exposure. These things. Who do you guys know who the TED youth director is? So get on board, and then also, and we're thinking locally. You're thinking in your local church, but why can't my local church just be maybe extend the reach of your local church? So think locally, but also think globally. I think the term for that these days is glocal. You want to think glocal. So maybe you can do an exchange program with somebody internationally. We're in the days of Zoom. We're in a pandemic. Switch it up. I'm hoping that this is making sense. So operating. You're a youth leader. So you need to be having connection with these different people, because they're supposed to be helping you. The conference youth director, the union youth director, the Trans-European youth director, they're supposed to be doing stuff that will be helping you in your ministry. But develop a relationship. So I'm talking about building relationships. All right. I've spent enough time there and I'm looking at the time, so I'll move on. All right. Have meetings and conduct them properly. Have meetings and conduct them properly. What do you mean by conduct them properly? Have an agenda. Have somebody taking minutes. This isn't just a quick thing. 2 minutes before. Can we have a quick meeting? There's no scheduled meeting. Have meetings and conduct them properly. Have an agenda and have minutes. Put a time next to the agenda item to say, so we've discussed this now. When's this going to be followed up by? Put a time schedule on that. Because sometimes we have agendas, we have meetings, and then that's what it is. It was just talk. Don't make the meetings just be done talk. You want to be making sure that there's things followed up. If you have meetings, I just feel like sometimes things don't happen because conversation isn't happening. Having the meeting helps to facilitate conversation. Now let me just stop sharing this thing for a second, because I'm now checking with people's faces just to make sure that Mercy. I've clicked the wrong button. I don't know what I've pressed. Are you guys here?
Yeah.
Mercy. All right, well, Sam, you have to share your screen again. I don't know what happened there. But is everyone with me so far? Okay, right. I saw some nodding heads. Let's carry on. Right, here we go. Know the church manual for yourself. Am I going to go on YouTube and say this? Pastor, is this going on YouTube?
Say it, Sam, say it.
All right. Know the church manual for yourself. There's a lot of myths going around as to what's in the church manual and what's not in the church manual. As a youth leader, likely, if you're there for any number of years, you're going to come up against some things that require you to understand the church manual. Maybe somebody gets somebody pregnant. Maybe somebody becomes pregnant. Maybe one of the young people are taking illicit medication. I mean, not medication, illicit drugs. Maybe a whole host of things. Whole host of things. And then it could be that some of the young people find out, they come to you as the youth leader. And they want to know what's supposed to happen next. You need to know. Why do you need to know? Because you're the youth leader. I'm hoping that makes sense. Know the church manual for yourself. Know when the referral, when you need to refer to pastor, when you need to be referring to the elders. Sometimes, unfortunately, it could be that people in the church think they know what's supposed to be happening in these situations, and they have these rules that they've made up as to what's supposed to happen, who's supposed to say what, and when you look in the manual and you read it, actually, what you just said doesn't make any sense. Sometimes that might be the pastor. Forgive me. Know the manual for yourself and just make sure you're clued up with what's supposed to happen and what's supposed to happen. Right, I'm hoping that wasn't too controversial. Know how the board operates. Know how the board operates. Know what's on the agenda. Know how much money is in your local church budget. Know what's in your budget. Know how the board operates. Know how to raise an item. Know how to make a motion. Know what it means. Because you know the church generally tends to follow something called Robert's Rules of Order. Be aware of those. Be aware of those. Don't be afraid to speak up. When you're bringing your thing to the board, don't just come slapdash. Do your research. How much is it going to cost? Where is this going to happen? Have you looked at insurance? How many young people are going to get there? If you get in a coach, now someone's put something in the chat because it's come at 1, but I don't know how to. What's the chat saying?
Yeah, and I was just asking, what is Robert's Rule of Order? Can you explain it?
Yeah. So Robert's rules. So you know, there's stuff where they talk about, "Hi, Mr. Chair, can I make a motion or question?" They got all these different rules that they use. Question. What's the other one? Seconding a motion. Okay, so let's go through it. Let's go through it. So you got your agenda items at church. When you're making a motion, what that means is you're asking the committee to move towards making a particular decision. If there's not a motion on the floor, I'm not sure what the discussion is about. When the motion's been made, then it has to be seconded before it can be discussed. Then now we're discussing on the motion at hand. I'm hoping does that make sense? Just give me a thumbs up. I mean, I can only see 4 thumbs, but give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. But these are some of the things. So if you Google, let me do this differently. You guys can see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
No, we just see the keynote. You're sharing your keynote, not your screen.
Oh. Yeah. Wiki that. If you look through here, you're going to see a number of things in there. And we don't follow all these rules, but there's a general conference rules of order. And those are the ones that we tend to follow either in a board meeting. In a board meeting, unfortunately, sometimes it's a bit more loose. But typically as you go like conference, union, you'll see them using the rules of order a bit more. But even in your board meetings, certain things need to be done, like motions, second in the motion, making sure you've got a proper agenda, calling question on a motion, things like those. Know how those things work. Know how those things work, because it just helps you when you're putting your point across. I'm hoping that makes sense. Right, let's carry on. Man, Sam, speed up. Think within your budget, but also think bigger than your budget. One time at a particular church, they put a freeze on spending because of the budgetary situation. The youth leader didn't let that stop them. They wrote to Pastor Ramdin, wrote to the BUC guy, Diane, we need some money. Wrote to the TED person, we need some money. We're talking about a local church youth leader. They were able to fund the church's youth leader church programs. Are you see what I'm saying here? So think within, but remember what I said about building relationships. So think within, but also don't be afraid to think bigger than your budget. You're leading. All you've got, maybe you've only got 5 loaves and 2 fish, but see if you can go beyond that and just go big. You're leading. Now, don't be foolish. You've got the budget. But if there's ways that you can work things, work them. Right, I'm hoping that makes sense. This is a classic one in many churches. Think about how you're going to navigate Pathfinders. Sometimes, not all churches, but many churches, Pathfinders and youth are the same people. It's the same parents. And sometimes it's the same time slots that you're trying to use. And sometimes that can create an excellent synergy, and sometimes, depending on personalities, that might cause a clash. So you want to make sure you've thought that through. Make sure it's a synergy and not a clash. I'm hoping that makes sense. Make sure it's a synergy and not a clash. Know who the influences are in your church. Know who your influences are in your church. The influences aren't necessarily on the church board. But we all have those people when sometimes decisions aren't even made out of business, but sometimes decisions are made in a Sabbath school. Have you ever seen that? Where somebody in Sabbath school will just stand up, I'm not sure why we're doing X, Y, Z. They need to make sure that we have X, Y, Z taking place next Sabbath. And the next thing you know, things happen. Know who the influencers are so that you're not butting heads and that you're navigating things properly. But at the same time, decisions should be made in the places and the spaces where decisions should be made. All right. Right. Put in your calendar conference youth events and get involved in the conference youth events. Put in your calendar conference youth events and get involved in your conference youth events. What does it do for you as a youth leader? It gives you a Sabbath off. Maybe I shouldn't phrase it like that. But it's something for the schedule, and it helps you, I don't know, it gives your youth more exposure to other youth across the conference. If you get involved in the youth conference events, call up Pastor Ramdin. Call Call up Diane, call up Pastor Fuller. Say, I see that this is going on the calendar. I've just been elected as a youth leader and I'd love to be involved. Let me know how I can be involved in the day. Get involved. It exposes you to other youth leaders across the conference. That way you're beginning now to network. Maybe your youth are strong in one area, but they're struggling in another area, and your church doesn't have the tools to be able to deal with that. But because you've networked now across the conference, you're able to bring in resources from another church. So get involved. So don't just come to your conference youth events. Get involved, and it gives your youth exposure as well. Get your youth involved. Get your youth involved, and you'll find that will benefit you. It just helps you with your programming. So you quote unquote get the day off. But if you're involved in the program, you're not getting a day off. But you get the point that I'm trying to make, and you just want to make sure that you expose your youth to let them know that it's not just the three of us here in this small church, but that we're part of something that's bigger. It's good to keep that perspective. It's 2021. We're in a pandemic. Social media is not optional. If you're not good with social media like me, that's okay. But what I am challenging you to do is to at least pick one platform and become proficient in it. At least pick one platform and become proficient in it. Because it's 2021, the youth are on social media. Things are happening on social media. That's what the conversation is. So if you're not on there, you're not where the conversation is. That means you're not able to influence where the youth are. So really and truly, I mean, I'm not a big social media man, but I'm on there because I recognize that social media is not optional. Be aware of the safeguarding insurance issues. Unfortunately, I had to leave the meeting last week when Chloe was speaking about safeguarding because I was on call for the hospital and I got called in. When you're planning the programs, say, I don't know, you're taking the youth out on a trip. You haven't told anybody, you just called up a few of the youth and it's a church, you've decided it's a church program and you're going. Somebody drops down and breaks their leg. You've got no insurance. The parents don't know. The church don't know. Hasn't been voted in. Come on, don't be making these schoolboy errors. And then we talk about, oh, the church isn't supporting me. No, you didn't communicate. You didn't communicate. Know who at the conference organizes insurance. In the North England Conference, it's Wangi. You phone her up, you give her the names, she sorts things out. I don't know who it is with the SEC, but find out. These people are literally a phone call away. If you email Wangi, she comes back to you same day. Sometimes the errors that we're having is because we're just doing things. We haven't told anybody, we're just doing it. You can't do that at work, and you probably can't do it in your own family home. But sometimes you want to do it in church. That's not how things work. And let's just be aware of some of these things. All right, number 11, learn how to navigate difficult conversations. Probably, Pastor, this should be a module in and of itself. I'm reading a book called Confronting Without Offending. I'm recommending it. It's coming from a church perspective. It's written by Christians. Confronting Without Offending. I think it's by, let me bring up my Kindle. Where's my Kindle? Kindle's not loading. Oh, there we go. Library. Confronting Without Offending. Confronting Without Offending. Confronting Without Offending. Deborah Smith Pugh's Confronting Without Offending, Positive and Practical Steps to Resolving Conflict. You want to put that on your list. Confronting Without Offending. The reality is that you're dealing with young people. People are going to catch up. If you've got a year and there's no arguments, may God continue to bless your ministry. come and teach the module next year because you obviously know what you're doing. There's going to be some situations where high tension, things like those, learn how to navigate difficult conversations. Learn how to navigate difficult conversations. Sometimes you're on social media and the person that you've asked to lead out tomorrow, you realize they were clubbing last night. Learn how to navigate difficult conversations. These are some of the things that you need to be dealing with. All right. Number 12, support other departments. What do I mean when I say that? Sometimes we talk about, oh, the church isn't supporting me. The church isn't supporting me, or no one's supporting the youth. Are the youth supporting? It's both ways. It's both ways. Support other departments, and as you do that, I remember one time, we put on a little program where as the youth, we decided we're just going to visit some of the older members in church. This is way back. When you do things like those, and you start just calling up some of the elders, elder, we want to pray for you as youth. We saw that the women's ministries are doing this. Is there anything that the youth department can do to support you in your program? When you do things like those, you're doing what I said about earlier on, building relationships. Building relationships. So now when you need something, now when you reach out, you're not doing it so that you can get something, but it just makes it easier when you need something. I'm hoping that makes sense. Right, Sam, speed up, because I'm looking at the time. Provide a voice to issues of society. Did I put this on my list? No, I didn't. So, for example, North England Conference. They went around and checked out some churches. And they looked at the Wi-Fi, what websites certain churches were going on the Wi-Fi in the North England Conference. Not all churches in the North England Conference, but some churches in the North England Conference. And they could look at the times that certain websites were being accessed on the Wi-Fi. During divine service, people accessing pornography. During prayer meeting, I mean, I don't know who's at prayer meeting on Wednesday. People are accessing pornography on the Wi-Fi, the church Wi-Fi. Everybody's speaking about certain issues, but sometimes the church isn't speaking about it. All over the conference, youth are confused about jewelry because no one's speaking about it. But there's all these hush-hush rules. So no one knows what they're supposed to be doing, what they're not supposed to be doing. I'm hoping that I'm making sense. Alcohol. No one knows what they're supposed to be doing. No one knows what they're not supposed to be doing. Provide a biblical base. And sometimes people genuinely want to know, what does the Bible say? And sometimes they've never heard it. All they know is it's one of the rules. Provide a voice to the issues of society. Why do you need to know these things? You're the youth leader. If no one else knows, familiarize yourself with these things and bring the youth up to speed. All right. Sam, you're getting too passionate. Carry on. Friends with everyone and impartial to everyone. Friends with everyone and impartial to everyone. So what am I saying here? You're not just a youth leader to your own family members and to your own culture and to your own gender and to your friendship group and to your friendship clique. You're the youth leader. That means everyone who's youth, that's your remit. Friends with everyone and impartial with everyone. But you're all big people, so I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And last point, immediately start thinking about mentoring. Like if you haven't thought about that already, think about that right now. Who can I, as a leader, if you're not mentoring, you're not a leader. If you're not mentoring, you're not a leader. Who can I, as a youth leader, think, you know what? Not that everybody doesn't have a potential, but sometimes some people, they're just on your radar. Who can I start training up as a leader? As a leader. Also, I mean, this isn't on the thing, but just in our last couple of moments, I feel like as an individual, I feel like every individual needs a personal board. This is just on an individual level now. A personal board. If you go to Nike, there's no way that the CEO of Nike is making all the decisions for Nike. There's no way that the CEO of Aldi is making all the decisions for Aldi. There's no way that the CEO of list any company, they've got a board that is speaking into the decision-making processes of that company. If the company's on about going forward, if the company's on about being visionary, if the company's on about just taking things to the next level, there's got to be more than one person in that, because no one person has the wisdom and the expertise to just take things to the next level in all areas, because no one's an expert in all areas. You are not an expert in all areas. That's why you've got a team. But also in your life, you're not an expert in all areas. I'm just about, so if you're gonna level up as a leader, you need to level up in your life. And one of the ways that you level up in your life is that you bring people in who can speak into your life in different areas. So even in your own life, you want to have a personal board. Now, you don't necessarily ask people, can you be on my personal board? But you connect with people. You connect with people in ways so that you can just have different people with different skill sets speaking into your life so that you can level up as an individual. And as you level up as an individual, maybe you begin to level up as a leader, and that will help you in your ministry. I'm hoping that made sense. I know I've spoken for a while. I should have stopped for questions, but I was conscious of the time, and I was only supposed to be going for 45 minutes, and it's 4 minutes over 45 minutes. So I don't think I've done too badly. Are there any questions? Let me come out of this. Stop sharing my screen. Well, God bless you. Obviously, questionless. It could be a good sign, it can be a bad sign, but we never know. Let's say a prayer to at least round off our session. Dear Lord, we thank you for your love, kindness, and mercy. You've been good to us. I'm praying that I haven't said anything too controversial that's going to come back and bite me on YouTube. And I'm praying that we will go forward being the leaders that you call us to be. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. You guys sure there's no questions on anything to do with working with the church?
Just one question for me, actually. I was just thinking about, Sam, you mentioned in insurance, like, we talked about, safeguarding events before. I was just thinking about, like, just an example, like, let's say out of this lockdown, we want to go out bowling, and the local centre has their own insurance or whatever. If we're planning that event, do we then consult our church insurance, or does that come under like the place where you're going to, like if it's like a bowling alley or something like that?
Yeah. I would definitely get insurance. Yeah, 100%. Because like if you go there and something happens, even though you're covered by them, but if something goes in the news, church group from whatever church was there, and that's in the news, and the church board didn't know about it, and you're not covered by the insurance, and these things, it can, so you just with young people, you never know. Unfortunately, yeah, and so I would definitely. And insurance is not a long thing. Literally, I don't know about NECyouth, but NEC, literally, you can phone Vangi at the conference, say, Vangi, we're doing X, Y, Z. These are the names, and she sends you the stuff back same day. So it's not an 8-week process, if that makes sense. It can literally be a same day thing. Yeah. But I would recommend it, because somebody might get knocked down on the journey there, and if it's a church event, at least then you're covered.
Sure. Thank you.
No.
Okay, anybody else? If not, well, thank you, Sam, for your presentation. If there are any questions that come up later on, we can ask them at the end. Okay, we're gonna do a little presentation on generations. Can you guys see that? I always lose my mouse when I start these things.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's why I was struggling.
I don't know why I lose my mouse. Do you guys lose a mouse when you share screen too? Anyway, it is what it is. Generations, different generations. So before I start, I'd say this: if you haven't seen this book or got this book, then you may want to get it. It's called Meet Generation Z. Meet Generation Z. The bulk of the youth in your church now are Generation Z. Some of you guys are Generation Z. Some of you are millennials. But Meet Generation Z, you can get it at Stamber Press. I believe they stock and sell it, and it's good. It says understanding and reaching the new post-Christian world. So these are just a few. I won't be able to get through the whole presentation, I don't think, but we'll get through what we can. Generation is an analytical tool for understanding culture and the people born. It reflects the idea that during a certain time period, the people who are born are influenced by a unique set of global events, values, technology, culture, and behavioral norms, etc. So we talk about our grandparents, we talk about our parents, we talk about ourselves, and each one of these is often a generation, and we're influenced by what happens during our lifetime, whether it's 9/11 or whether it's the social media boom, or whether it was the Vietnam War, or whether it was, World War II. All of these major world events and technologies, the invention of the television or the video player or the computer, they all influence how we interact and how we go about life. So there's these different things, as we just mentioned. So different generations. Build a generation are born before 1945. Sometimes they're called the greatest generation. They're born around World War II or sometimes in the 30s. And we still have this generation in church today, remnants of them. And there's some of your churches where you come from where this generation still run the church. They may not be the elders, but they are the leaders. And what they say sometimes is what goes. So it's important to understand this generation. Sometimes there's less of them because they're dying off now, more and more, but they still are around in churches. Then you have the baby boomer generation. They're kind of a broad swath of about 20 years, though there are huge differences really between someone who's born in the late 1940s and someone who's born in the early 1960s. But we look at them all and put them in the baby boomer category. This was a time of the hippie movements, protests, the Beatles, and culture was changing dramatically. This was the first generation where women went into the workplace. This was the first generation where women's rights became a big thing, and they were kind of breaking off the shackles of the grandparents' generation. The idea that the dad goes to work and the mum stays home and does the cooking, all of those ideas started to drastically change with this generation who kind of fought against the norms of previous generations. Divorce started to happen as a more normal thing in this generation, whereas in previous generations it wasn't. You just stayed married and miserable your whole life if you didn't like each other. Generation X. Around 1965 to 76 or 83, depending what social scientists you talk to. Now parents are getting divorced, latchkey kids. What do I mean by that? It's more of an American term, but that's kind of This generation, the mum's working, their dad's working, they're coming home, they're letting themselves in the house themselves, and things like that never happened before. This generation grew up largely in the late 70s, early 80s, and they are still a very significant generation in our churches today. A lot of your elders in church today would probably Generation X, and they are really the parents of generations we're going to see in a minute. The millennial generation, and it's interesting, you notice it says 77 to 83. There's actually what some people call a micro generation. And some say that 77 to 83 represents a micro generation. They call them zillennials because they say they have characteristics of Generation X and characteristics of millennials, but you can't really separate them in one or the other camp. But anyway, be that as it may, millennials go from around 1980-ish to around the end of the 90s. Roughly, they're born in the 80s or the 90s, and they're classed as millennials. It used to be that the millennials were the youth in church, but really, if you look at the age of it, they still are youth, but they'd be what we classify today as older youth. They're like 25 to 40, basically, millennials. So yeah, they are the children of baby boomers. They're sometimes called Generation Y. There's been a whole load of studies done on millennials, but millennials, like I said, they're around 25 to 40 years old now, or 25 to 42 or 43. On the high end, roughly, those are millennials. So here's an interesting thing that they did with these different generations, not Z, but different generations. When they got people to describe themselves, they asked them different words, and they found, if you look at the words of the Builder generation, the Generation Boomers, X, and Millennials, they all describe themselves as smarter, 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 smarter. They all describe themselves as having work ethic or things like that, or respectful. But when you get to millennials, there's two words missing from how millennials describe themselves from the previous generations. They no longer use the word respectful, and they no longer use the word, millennials no longer use the word work ethic or value and morals as they describe themselves. Representing that, I think in the internet age, there have been significant changes. Work ethic and respectful have changed, leading some to say, and it's rightly so, that the millennials are discontinuously different from what's come before, meaning they have changed completely. There's a huge difference. I mean, every generation, there's always generational challenges. Then we got Generation Z. These are people born late 90s to around 2012, which would represent, people who are, 20 or anything from really 12 up to 22, 3, 4, or 5 would be a Generation Z. Digital natives, they cannot comprehend what it was like. If you talk about the life before mobile phones, they don't understand that, because they've always lived in a world where there's mobile phones. They don't understand what it's like not to have the internet. Those of us who are millennials, or if there's anyone here older than that, but those of us who are millennials, or we can, when the preacher says, don't spend time on your mobile phone, we remember what it was like not to have a mobile phone. But when the preacher says that to the young people, why are you on your phone so much? What do you mean I'm on phone so much? I mean, that's just like, it's always been there. Social media has always been there. Facebook was invented in 2005 or 6, and some of these people weren't even born yet. So Facebook or Instagram, it's native. They've always grown up knowing it. It's not like, oh, you can or can't do without it. It's just a part of life. Just like for the generations older, growing up with a television in the home was normal. Everyone had one. Growing up with a mobile phone or an internet connection is not just a privilege, it's a right. It's something that needs to happen. So Gen Z are mostly the children of Generation X. Today we're seeing these are things that we see, and you guys will see it as youth leaders, that the science, culture, media, technology, entertainment, it intensifies the difference between generations. Like I said before, there's always been differences. Our parents argued with their parents, and their parents argued with their parents. But now it's like, you could argue that with the invention of the technology and mobile technology, where people have a computer, a supercomputer in their pocket that has access to all the world's information or friends or whoever they want in an instant, it intensifies these differences between generations. And many parents have a hard time understanding these things, let alone relating to the different values, beliefs, and assumptions that comes with it. So there's another book I read called You Lost Me, Why Young Christians Are Leaving Church. And this is a quote from that. And it says that, the transmission of faith from one generation to the next, it relies on the messy and flawed process of young people finding meaning in the traditions of their parents. And all of us have to make sense of this faith through the relationships and the wisdom that we have. But when those relationships change, or the sources of our wisdom changes, it's difficult for people to make sense of a new reality. The days where the pastor or the elder or the conference pastor, president, or youth director held a significant amount of authority, unquestioned authority in the lives of young people, those days are long gone. You have to earn your respect, or you're just one voice amongst many that they will listen to in their search for the answers to the questions that they have. You are no longer, the buck no longer stops with you. These are some areas where Generation Z and millennials are different. They're more likely to consult the internet than the pastor, as I've mentioned. They're tech savvy. They say things like, I found something on the internet, which you just have to do a quick Google search, and that means pretty much nothing. The last one, they're exposed to a wide variety of religious content, but they don't really have a grid for evaluating it. It's, that there's so much information out there. I was reading a book actually that's analyzing. A lot of people say today that we're living in an age where George Orwell's 1984 is coming, around, the big brother society that's just kind of, watching down on us. The book she's reading is called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And it kind of analyzes, are we going down the route of George Orwell's 1984? Or there was another book, I forget the name of it, that was written by someone else who kind of had a different hypothesis. And his hypothesis was that we're not going to go down a 1984 route where there's going to be this big brother. We're going to go down a route where there's going to be so much information out there. There's going to be so much knowledge out there. And people are just going to be so saturated with stuff, information, that they're just going to switch off to everything and not even care. And the book kind of proposes that we're actually in the second phase, not the first one. And there's so much information out there, people just don't care. Alienation, so authority is different. The structure of society, people don't have faith in the institutions anymore. What do I mean by that? The institution of the government, we don't trust it. The institution of politicians, we don't trust them. The institution of the church, the institution of that, it just holds less significance in people's life. Alienation. The way society is structured has changed. Births, 50% of births are outside of marriage today, so the family structure has changed. Instead of going to parents, young people today are more likely to ask their peers what they think about a given situation and get advice from them. And so sometimes it's a case more of the blind leading the blind and finding direction. Won't go over that point. Voting is not on the radar, but if you just look at the recent Brexit stats, you can see that the young people didn't vote, even though they complained about the outcome of the vote. Many superficial acquaintances, said a few. Social media is that, you've got 1,500 followers on Instagram, but you're still lonely. And they have lots and lots of access to lots and lots of people, but very few intimate relationships. Skepticism about talking heads. Access, they perceive reality through their screens. Teachers and pastors are fact-checked in real time. Personal news isn't real unless it's been shared on social media, your relationship status or what you're doing or whatever. And so access is different, how they access the information that is out there. Everyone's an expert. It creates a my-sized epistemology. Their epistemology is how they find truth. How do they find truth? They find it themselves. They don't trust the structures of hierarchy in society. And so we see a different access, different authority, different levels of alienation. And so there's a big difference really with these generation today. And so we have to understand that they think differently. And it's also important to try and help as Sam was talking about, the elders or other people. try and help these other generations in church to understand that, there are needs, and things may need to be done slightly differently with the younger generation than maybe they've been done before. But those relationships that Sam was mentioning, the first point Sam mentioned, are key. Relationship with the youth that you're serving, and relationship with the older generations to kind of be a bridge between generations. Gen Z are the characteristics of them. They're complicated. Gen Z are complicated. They admire their families, but they don't always see their family relationship as key to their identity. Only 4% of Generation Z have a biblical worldview. Now, this is very important, because the peers of our young people growing up where they just don't have a biblical worldview. So it's important for us to teach them, obviously, what Adventism is or what Christianity is, but we need to be equipping them to also answer maybe some of the more philosophical or question just about faith in general, creation, evolution, or some of the questions just about the biblical worldview before they would even be able to defend some of these other things as well. This is the first generation in the West that's raised in a post-Christian context. The rise of the nuns. In the UK in 1963, 3% of people said they had no religion. In 2015, which is already 6 years ago, 44% of people said we have no religion. They're the nuns. They are the biggest block in British society today. People that check the box, not Church of England, not Roman Catholic, but they check nothing as the box. And that number goes up to 66% when you count those under the age of 25. So 2/3 of under 25 say no religion, no even association with religion. Atheism is double amongst Generation Z compared to the rest of the population. So nuns, they want factual evidence to support their beliefs. And so the three characteristics that we face really in society is called secularization, privatization, and I forget the third one off the top of my head. So if secularization, that's where society has religion removed from it. So there's no religion in schools, there's no religion in the workplace. You can't pray with patients at the NHS and all those things. So religion is removed from the institutions of society. We see that taking place, in the UK today. Privatization is that process where your faith is private. It's just like which party did you vote for? Did you vote for the Conservatives or the Labour, or did you vote for Liberal Democrats? Well, I don't ask you, because that's private, And so faith is like that too. It's become a private affair. It's not something that we really talk about. And on top of that, there's pluralization, where there's all of these ideas out there, and they're all kind of okay. They're all valid in and of themselves. So what you believe as a Christian is just your private belief, and keep it private. And it's just one of many ideas out there. And how do we kind of present faith as something that is vital, or something that is not just me personally, but is also something more than that, in an environment where there's not really such a supportive context for faith? Then faith is private, like your favorite food, or it's pluralized in society where everything is seen to be equally valid. Here's a few other kind of less mind-blowing statistics about a generation, but here's some interesting things. Eating out. Notice which generation eats out the most. Millennials are the biggest eat out generation. Sam raising up the hand there. I see that. The biggest generation to eat out. 58% of millennials eat out once a week. I'm not going to ask how many of you guys normally eat out 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, but I know that covers some of you as well. Generation Z, 46%. So it's still pretty high. X is high, but boomers, it drops. Leave your current job. This is an interesting one. Well, maybe not our parents, but some of you with your grandparents. The idea that, you went to go to a workplace and you worked there your whole life. My dad, he essentially had two major jobs in life. He worked for the health service in Oxford, and he moved up to Warwickshire and worked for the health service there. Two main jobs, really. One was, I guess you could say, it's an internal transfer, and that was his life. He stayed there. But millennials are 42% of millennials will leave their job after 2 years and go to the next job, and the next one, and the next one. So there's less loyalty The generation that, you know, I go to work at the Land Rover factory in Birmingham when I'm 19, 20, and I stay there till I'm 67. That doesn't happen anymore. That doesn't happen anymore. Top spare time activities, listen to music, Generation Z, as opposed to watching television. So Spotify and all these things are boom, big. Sexuality, this is an interesting one. And I think, you know, when we have a church culture that's afraid to discuss these things, the issues that we and the youth are facing at school and at work, if we're not helping them navigate these issues in a spiritual context and helping them navigate these issues from a faith foundation, then they're going to get the answers elsewhere. 1/3 say that gender is how someone feels, not how they're born. 88% say they're exploring their sexuality more than the past. And this is a sexually fluid generation, which is the product of previous generations' views on divorce, the boomers, abortion, X, cohabitation, which came in during Generation X and millennials, gender roles all switching up, same-sex marriage, those are all issues that today's generation who are born have handed down to them from the last 50 years of life. And they've got to kind of navigate all of these things that some of their friends are, you know, going out with the same sex, and some of them have flipped roles twice, and they go around to their friend's house, and you know, the mum is the mum, but is living with a dad who's living with a man who's not the dad, and abortion and divorce. These are things, and they're confronted with these things. And I think we need to be able to discuss those in a faith context and give them biblical answers to these issues. Otherwise, they'll just get the answers elsewhere. Screenagers, these statistics are probably 2 years out of date right now, and it's probably different now, but in the last 2 years, 57% use their screen for 4 hours or more per day. If you have an iPhone, it tells you what your screen time is per average each week. 72% watch 2 hours of YouTube a day. 92% go online every day. Interestingly, drug use and alcohol consumption are at their lowest levels for decades. But that's not always a good thing. So as I mentioned, social media is native to them. Snapchat is kind of, we've moved on. Well, Snapchat's still there, but we got TikTok now. TikTok Clubhouse is just blowing up in the last month or 2 or 3 of our lives. There's new platforms coming up all the time. David Pacman said, growing up with a supercomputer in your pocket, connected to most of the world's population and knowledge, has created an irreversible pattern of behavior unlikely to revert to the ways of previous generations. It's just not really possible not to have a smartphone these days anymore. And so while baby boomers can't remember a world without a television, millennials can't remember a world without a computer, most of them. Gen Z doesn't know a world without constant, immediate, and convenient access to the web. When you go around to someone's house, you ask them what the Wi-Fi password is, even though you've got data. Why are you doing that? You've got data. You don't need their Wi-Fi password. But anyway, Gen Z, these are the top social media sites. Notice Gen Z is is on Facebook a lot less than millennials. YouTube is slightly higher. Snapchat's higher. This is, like I said, to be honest, I should have updated this presentation because TikTok should be on there. Most used devices, smartphone is the most used device of Gen Z. Millennial, it's a desktop, then a smartphone, then a TV. For Gen Z, it's a smartphone, TV, laptop in that order. So there's smartphone is much higher. Weekly TV usage, notice that it's the lowest amongst Gen Z because it's not necessarily they watch less TV, or maybe it is slightly, but it's on demand is key. This was interesting. I think this one has implications for how we communicate as a church. Notice how phone calls are down. Lowest in Gen Z is phone calls. Text message is 37%, which is lower actually than millennials in Generation X. They are 45 and 45% for text messages. But what is hugely bigger is 20% social media, which could be messaging through Instagram. It could be sending, messages on there. 15% is mobile messaging apps. 5% is email. So, but look at the other generations as well. If the parents of your youth are Generation X, and 36% of them communicate by phone with their friends and family, or if the parents of your youth are boomers and 53% of them communicate by a phone call and not by a mobile messaging app, you can't use the same strategy to reach everybody in the church, particularly the parents. The way that you may influence the parents and communicate with them has to be different to how you communicate with a younger generation. Knowing your church members obviously is key, because there may be variances with each person, but it's important to know that there's differences amongst age groups and generations for how we communicate with them. Bullying is a big issue. Online bullying amongst this generation, that's also something that needs to be talked about and needs to be support needs to be provided where it is needed. Generation Z, strong conformity and tradition, like storytelling, individual displays. Spending habits are different, and if anything, this pandemic has taught us that. I think COVID-19 has just sped up what was going to happen anyway, and that is eventually it's going to be the death of the high street, and the death of shopping centers or shopping malls will be a casualty of this generation, just like whatever, London taxi cabs are the casualty of Uber. 93% like to shop without interruption. They only use cash for 6% of their transactions, and so digital payment is native. I still don't know why we haven't got contactless payment in our churches, and hopefully when we go back there. Now, obviously, we have to give our offering online, so everything has changed with people. I hope you guys are giving offering, and not just your tithe, your church as well. Amen. And so you've obviously doing that electronically, but and that'll probably continue that way, but after this goes. But that's an interesting stat. Parenting traits. This is the irony, actually, for Generation Z. They're parented by Generation X, which was the latchkey kid generation that kind of had more freedom. And an irony of this generation is that they're underprotective. In an age when they need protecting like never before, they're kind of left alone more than they should be. So sexting, online bullying, internet porn, self-abuse, all of these trends are up. And they tend to have underprotective parents, whereas millennials had very protective parents. The whole helicopter parent that kind of wouldn't let the kids out their sight is more of a trait with kids who are millennials than it is Generation Z. Yeah, this is just the idea that childhood was a time when you're protected from certain ideas. When you're a child, you didn't know about the complexities of life because your mind can't handle the contradictions of adulthood. Only as you get older and you're psychologically and emotionally and able to handle all these contradictions of life do you learn about all of these things. Whereas now Generation Z are learning all of these contradictions and complexities at a much, much younger age. And they have a phrase called growing older younger. And I had some statistics, I can't remember what they were, but it was something like the average age in 30 years ago to get your first Barbie doll, for argument's sake, and that's not a sign of growing up necessarily, but a Barbie, it was so different that it was crazy. Like the average age of a Barbie doll 30 years ago was like 9 years old to get your first Barbie doll. Now the first Barbie doll average age is like 2. Because by the time you're 4, no one wants a Barbie doll anymore. And you've moved on quickly from that. Parents are under pressure. Kids have to get their smartphones. The kids in your church, they're putting their parents under pressure to get these things for Christmas or their birthdays. But one of the biggest and most influential aspects of media today is pornography. And that's something that needs to be spoken about amongst our youth groups and churches. And there are websites of support and things that people can get to help them with this. Sam mentioned something earlier about pornography, that there was churches that found people on pornography sites during divine service. It's the first generation with the internet in their pockets. And so 17 of of 18 to 34-year-olds are regular viewers, with 11 being the average age of the first view. It's something happening. And the statistics for people in church are the same as those outside of church. There's no difference. Absolutely no difference. So the idea that when people come to church that, you know, they don't struggle with that is not true. This generation is being crippled by pornography, not just church generation. Society is being crippled by this. And so it's something that needs to be spoken about. Boys exposed to sexually explicit media were 3 times more likely to engage in oral sex and intercourse 2 years after exposure. You know, when we had the relationship weekend in Leeds 2 years ago now, it's kind of crazy, 2 years ago. Anyway, 2 years ago in Leeds with Sebastian and Candice Braxton, we did a Q&A in the afternoon. Some of you were there. And we had the questions that came in. And we probably had the question that came in 6 or 7 or 8 times. We only asked the question once, but it came in at least 6 to 8 times. And that's why we're like, wow, we got this question so many times. And it was the first question we asked. And the question was, you know, can I have oral sex with my boyfriend or my girlfriend? It was just like, bam, that question came in so much, because what? You know, pornography, they're seeing it. No, we can't have sex, but how far can I go without really going as far as I should go? That question came in over and over and over again. It's an issue out there. People are like, well, I'm not going to have sex with you, but I'll have oral sex with you, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the point is, these are issues people are facing. We get that question 6 to 8 times in one day. It's likely these are questions people have. Now, how are you going to handle some of these questions or have these discussions in ways that people are going to be comfortable raising them? That's different with every church and how to navigate that. Girls are twice as likely to engage in it and 1.5 more times likely to have intercourse if they've seen pornography. The mayor of London, consultant Chloe Combo, said they're almost certainly imitating what they see. 70% of 15 to 18-year-olds have sexted. We had there's been sexting issues in church as well. We had issues anyway. With that, 50% have sent semi-naked or naked photos or videos of themselves. 84% have received it. I mean, these things are happening. So I'll close here. Values, is it right? Is it loving? How does it work? The builder generation, the old folks in church, the really old folks in church, what inspires them and motivates them in life? Is this something right? Is it right? And a lot of the older generation in church, that's all you need to tell them. You know, bang, Sabbath is the Sabbath, is Saturday, okay. Don't eat pork, okay. Don't drink, okay. Like, show me a Bible text, there you are. Okay, that's it, settled. Is it right? I'll do it, you know? And that's it. The baby boomers, probably because the influence of flower power, love, peace, and the Beatles, is it loving? And, you know, does it show God's love? And all this God's love, fused into everything. And that's kind of, you know, infiltrated the whole culture of church, which doesn't really resonate really so much with the younger millennial Generation Z, who are, yeah, well, it might be right, it might be loving, but how does it work? You know, you're telling me the Sabbath, to keep the Sabbath day holy. You know, what does that mean? How do I practically do that? And the problem sometimes is that the millennials or Gen Z are asking the older generation how something works. It's not a sign of rebellion. They just want to know, how does this practically work? What does it look like for me to do or believe that? And oftentimes the builder generation, they can't answer that question because they've never had to answer that question, and they'll probably go to their grave never answering that question, and they'll go to heaven and everything will be fine. But the younger generation, they want to decipher how does this work practically. And so these are a few thoughts on generations. It's a broad, sweeping overview, but it's important for us to understand. I mean, some of you may come from churches that may be predominantly boomers, or maybe you've got, you know, big gaps between your generations. I don't know, but some of you, you know, you have people from certain generations, and at the end of the day, though, even with all these differences between generations, there is still that need for that personal touch, and even people who may be from an older generation, they can still connect with the young people. And even though you may see yourself as a millennial, you can still connect with Generation Z, or if you're a Generation X, you can still connect, because every generation seeks personal interaction and friendship and someone who cares for them. And so all those things are important, but these are just some broad strokes of generational differences that are important for us to understand. So any thoughts, questions, comments, or yeah.
Just to say on the sexuality pornography thing, I feel like definitely, and I don't know, you've got some training on this later on down the line in this series, but I feel like it's, as a youth leader, it's not something you can say, as in you've got to equip yourself now and don't feel like it's not going to come up, because it will. At some stage, it's coming up, and it's better to equip yourself now so that when it comes up, you're able to navigate that conversation or that scenario as and when it comes. A book that my friend recommended to me, and I've bought it. I haven't read it yet, but it looks good. Let me just go and grab it. It's called Help, Someone I Know Has a Problem with Porn. So I'm looking to go through this, and it was Douglas Gowsey, and he was just saying it's got some really practical things you can do in there just to help somebody who's in that space.
I was a bit surprised that depression didn't come up.
Oh, it is an issue. I just didn't have it in the presentation. Yeah, sorry. That is a huge issue. Depression, mental health, self-abuse. Yeah. Yeah, I can send these slides out, but I would encourage you to do, if it's not reading a whole book like this, there is definitely valuable articles on Barna.com. Barna.com are a evangelical group, conservative evangelical group. When I say evangelical, they're kind of pretty Sunday church, but they're just a group who study the trends in Christianity, and they release studies. If you sign up to the newsletter, you'll get a newsletter about once a week that often has, latest trend or latest research on what do young people think of this, or what does this generation think of that. Barna is, they release some excellent resources on the latest trends, and they do have, if you go to their website and do a little poke around, you'll find stuff that they've written on Z, millennials, and so on. And so I would encourage you to check their website out, Barna.com. They have some pretty interesting resources there.
Could you pop that in the chat just to get the right spelling?
Yeah. Let me just check the website exactly, one sec. I mean, you could even use some of these articles as like Kickstarters for discussions amongst the youth, maybe, as giving you a focal point to discuss, because there's data. I mean, I'm just looking at two of the titles here, the last two: new data on Gen Z, perceptions on pressure, anxiety, and empowerment, or Gen Z feel bad about the amount of time spent on teens. You could use some of these things as kind of, discussion points. Like, hey, look, let's all have a look at this, and we're going to discuss it from there. as opposed to I'm discussing you. You know, we're discussing a trend that's pervasive amongst your peers, and let's talk about it. All right, guys. Next week we don't have one weekend off next week, and then the week after is going to be what Sam was talking about. We have Coming Out Ministries. Some of you have heard of them. I think they're all based in the States, but they kind of specialists in dealing with things like sexual addictions and things like that. So they're going to do a presentation on that. As I mentioned it today, very important or valid issue. And so they're going to be sharing that in not next week, but the week after. Okay.
Is there anything that you guys would want to see? All right, well, Pastor, this is like we're on track.
Say that again.
Is there anything that you guys would want to know about as we're putting the training? Well, I say we, Pastor, I'm just putting the training on, but I do send him an email or two every now and again just to remind him about things. Is there anything that we want to
For me, on my end, the most frequent conversations I've been having with the youth that I have are about the gender fluidity and the gender norms and how exactly that all works. So they have had a lot of stuff in school about gender being the choice, and so they are getting a lot of that. So trying to navigate and have those types of conversation from a biblical point of view, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Also, emotional intelligence. We just had our AY based around understanding emotions and how they affect our day-to-day lives. And it would be good if we could explore a little bit of that, because it's a conversation that I found a lot of church members were intrigued about, to understand how we as Christians can display a certain type of behavior in church, but at home it's a different situation, and the youths are able to distinguish between the double standards that they see. And instead of wanting to know Christ, they reject Christ in that process, because they feel like if that's how the examples around them are behaving, then they don't want anything to do with Christ. So I think something along that line, and to deal with depression as well.
Yes, something about depression, because I've had multiple people reach out to me, and with the pandemic, it's becoming a real problem, and parents are struggling how to deal with it. So if we could offer them some help at all, that would be great.
And also on the pandemic, our current issue is trying to keep the youth engaged, because obviously it's been like a year now, and the stuff that we were doing at the beginning of lockdown, it's not, because everyone's sick of like staring at a Zoom screen, which obviously we get, but just kind of how to keep people motivated, because it looks like we're going to be here for a while.
Okay.
I've noted those.
All right, guys.
Anything else that's come up? All right, cool.
Anything else?
Go on, Pastor.
No, just connect if there's anything else, that's all. If not, we'll close with prayer. Have you guys seen the new lineage videos that have come out? We've got a new series that's out at the minute on the 7 churches. So it's something you can use maybe as well with the studying of Revelation 2 and 3. There's a little 5-minute video. They're in the process of coming out, so they'll be out all out by the end of March. But they're in process.
I've seen one of them. They're pretty good, actually.
Are they available on YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lineage Journey is the YouTube channel. Yeah. All right, guys, let's have a word of prayer and we will draw to a close. Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for this opportunity we've had to be together. I pray, Lord, you'll be with each one of the youth leaders, youth assistants, and youth team members who are gathered on this call. I pray, Lord, that you would bless us, that we may ourselves have resilience and perseverance and fortitude in the midst of the lockdown that we're in. And, you know, it's coming up to a year almost that we've been on our screens. I pray, Lord, you would give us personally endurance and fortitude in these times in which we live. May we also be able to inspire and motivate others, even sometimes when we aren't inspired or motivated ourselves. I pray that you would bless the churches and youth groups that are represented. And Lord, grant us creativity, most importantly, and Lord, grant us your Holy Spirit to fill us and bless our ministries. May we be renewed by you every day. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you.
All right, guys. God bless.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thank you.
Okay, folks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Aiko?
Pastor, how do you think it went?
It was okay. People are a bit quiet today.
Quiet today.
That's what I thought as well. Yeah, but
I think there's a lot of people, Horace included, who had their cameras off today. It's like half. we need to put that. We need to bring that rule back next week because people they're slipping into the cameras off mode.
Really, I'm not gonna lie. I agree. As much as I do it, but I agree.
Yeah, especially like if we've got guests as well. Like we got coming up. Is it just Michael that's coming next week?
Yeah.
In 2 weeks' time. Yeah, if we've got guests as well, we wanna do the thingamajig. We want to make sure cameras are on. I didn't say anything that's going to get me in trouble, did I?
Nah, not at all.
All right, that's good.
Yeah,
I don't know if I should have
Sam.
put my Kindle up. Pardon?
It was good. I didn't catch all of it, but it was good.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't know how far to take things, especially if you're going to speak about pastors. Anyways. Aiko, bring Enoch. We want to see him.
Aiko?
What are you saying, Horace?
No, so everybody knows you, so you just say it as it is.
Horace, turn your camera on. There's no one
You're
else
a waste,
here.
man.
There's no one else here, Horace. Man. Turn the camera on.
I was lying down on the sofa. Let me sit down. No, it's just good to just lie down and listen and watch sometimes, you know. And my hair was on camera already today. I thought, no, I'm not switching it on. Black man troubles.
Have you been to the barber yet?
I've not been barber since lockdown, since March last year.
Wow.
I've got long hair now, long hair.
One sec, guys. How long's your hair now, Horace?
Very long. I've got it in plus, in Cairo.
Let me get some water, 1 second.
Oh, Enoch's gone to bed.
Enoch's gone to bed already? Quite early. Well,
I could put him to bed. I didn't even get a chance to say goodnight. Hard times.
How take you do rag off?
Second, Sam.
Take you do rag off?
No chance.
Hey, come on, Horace, man. It's only us. It's only us. There's no ladies here.
It's a bird nest under here. No chance. I had them in Cornwalls for about 6 weeks now.
You got locks under there, basically.
Trust me, that's what it is right now.
Hair's just matted. You know, this lighting is quite decent, you know.
You got a ring light, Sam?
We were on the BUC executive committee or whatever you call it today, and I just sent, Sam had half of his face dark and half of it light. I'm like, Sam, I'm gonna sort that out, man.
Sort the lighting out. So sent me an Amazon link.
You should get a ring light, Sam.
Yeah, you got one.
That's what I've got.
Oh, you got one. Oh, sound.
That's what I've got on right now.
You need one for Zoom these days. Because if you're getting the lighting wrong, it's wrong, you know. Oh, so you should have got the big one, Sam. They work better.
They do, but this one you just clip on the laptop.
Oh.
The big ones are like, they're good, but have you got one, Horace?
I haven't, you know. But my light is dim in my living room now. So it's pretty dark. Usually the light in my living room is quite good.
Where'd you live,
Mara
Horace?
sent a message.
Huh?
Where'd you live?
Edgbaston?
No. He lives in Winson Green.
Sam, let's go. Let's not even start this conversation. Don't like bring
Look up, no. Google Maps, Gillette Road.
Do not bring past
Google Maps. Horace, didn't you have a random woman try to get into your car the other day?
Okay.
That doesn't happen in Edgbaston, does it? It happens in Winson Green. A random woman opened up the car door and tried to sit inside.
You know what, Pastor? Sam lives in the ghetto and he tries to bring other people in the same category as him. You know, sometimes when you know, sometimes you hang out with some people.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend.
Sam, your place is like ghetto.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I live in the best area, but Horace, you pretend like you live in the best area and you don't.
I didn't say that.
That's the issue.
I didn't say that, but Edgbaston is a nice place. Google
you don't live in Edgbaston. Horace, you don't live in Edgbaston. Let's keep this thing 100. I got a message from Marla. She said, thanks for another informative program. God bless you and Pastor Ramdin. Have a good week. So it must have been okay. People were just quiet today.
We just gave them information.
It's just a tired day. Because
basically
the same. Have people been consistent every week?
Well, there's a few people that haven't really shown up, but the ones today are all been regulars.
Oh, that's good then.
Gillette Road is by Edgbaston Reservoir.
Yeah, it's just behind. I live just behind the reservoir.
Pastor, don't let him fool you. He's not living in. He's not in.
Quite exotic as well. It's like going to the Caribbean beach when you go to the reservoir.
Horace, have you ever been to the Caribbean?
So let's not go there. Let's not go there because you claim you're Jamaican. I don't even know
because if you've been to the Caribbean, you'll know that Edgbaston Reservoir is nothing like it. Right. Let me share my screen. Oh,
I'm still recording. Oh man.
Oh my God.